Hi there, Michelle here from McQuaid TV. We're helping you find ways to move from functioning to flourishing by putting the latest science to the real world test. Today to help us, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Margie Warrell. Margie's a Forbes columnist, master coach and best-selling author who's passionate about empowering people to be more courageous in work, leadership and life. The 3 books she's written all reflect her passion for helping people live bigger, braver and better lives. Find Your Courage, Stop Playing Safe, and her latest release, Brave. Founder of Global Courage and Raw Courage TV, Margie draws on her extensive background in business and psychology to run courage-building programs with organisations including NASA, Accenture, Oracle and the UN Foundation. Margie shared her expertise with leading media from CNN to the Wall Street Journal and Today Show. Now, she learnt a lot about courage growing up on a dairy farm in rural Australia, and since then has stepped out of her comfort zone countless times, travelled extensively to some of the most remote regions of the world, is the mother of 4 noisy children, and an expert in picking up the many balls she drops in her daily juggling act. Needless to say, when it comes to living and leading with courage, Margie speaks from experience. Welcome, Margie.
Hi, Michelle. It's great to be here with you.
I'm so pleased you could join us today because I really want to talk to you about your new book, Brave. And I think the best place to start with that is bravery something we can learn, or is it something that we're born with?
Well, we obviously all have different personality types, and some of us are more risk averse than others. But bravery and courage, those virtues are actually skills that we can learn. So it is about, just like going to the gym every day, the more often you go, the stronger your muscles are. Well, it's the same when it comes to just being brave in our everyday lives. The more often we act bravely, the braver we become.
So what have you done in your own life to build up your bravery?
Look, where do I start? I think it goes back to actually I shared in my new book, Brave, I shared how growing up on the dairy farm in rural Australia, I was big sister of 7 kids, and I got a horse for my 10th birthday. I pleaded with my parents, but he was a lot bigger than I had been reckoning on. I thought they'd get value for money if they got me a big horse that I'd grow into. And I just remember looking up thinking, how am I going to ride this horse? But I was determined, and within about 12 months, I was like, okay, can I get a faster horse now? And the faster horse arrives, like, oh, how am I going to manage this really flighty horse? And, I share that story. It's a pretty simple anecdote. But, when we do something that scares us a little bit, we realize, oh, I can do more than I thought. And, and then I moved out of home at 18 and then traveled extensively around the world. And now I have 4 kids. And I have to say number 4 was an act of courage in particular. So, there's been lots of things that I've done to build my own bravery. Some of them I've chosen and some of them have just been forced upon me. And I think that's an important distinction to make, that sometimes life happens to us and we're forced to be courageous. Something happens we would never have chosen. And yet often when those things happen, we realise, I'm capable of more than I thought I was. And so I often say to people, if you're so capable in times of adversity and challenge, imagine where there's talent and potential like sitting on the table because you're not being compelled to act courageously. And what could you accomplish and who could you be if you were really clear about what it is you wanted to do and had a strong sense of purpose?
I think that's so true. And I think, though, one of the things in those moments when we're not compelled to be brave is that fear of taking risks that holds us back. So what can we do in those moments where we're not forced to be brave, to be a little bit less risk adverse and grab life with both hands?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few different things. One of the things, actually we're wired, and the neuroscience of bravery is that we're wired to overestimate the size of risks, to overestimate the probability of things going wrong, to underestimate ourselves, and to also deny or just discount the cost of inaction. So we think, oh, I'll just stick with things how they are. They're not so bad. But generally, if we're not happy in an area of our lives, whether it's our health or our career or our relationships, they don't tend to stay the same. They tend to get worse over time. So I think the first thing is just to rethink risk. Where is it actually that how you're judging the risks is actually just really your cognitive biases are coming into play there and you're getting it wrong. But secondly, ask yourself, for the sake of what is it that I really want to do, and to connect with a big vision. What is it that excites you and inspires you? We're all here really in the big scheme of the world a pretty short time. And so I know for me, and when I work with clients, is getting them to connect with a vision, a big vision that inspires them, but also to get them present to the cost of inaction. And help them think about, but what's the risks associated with not doing something brave? Because there's a cost, there's a risk to that too, and often we don't think about that risk so much.
I know you said that to me a while ago, and that advice has certainly stuck with me, and I often now encourage my clients to think, for the sake of what? Are you getting out of bed each morning? Are you showing up? Are you living this life? And I think having that big vision definitely helps us be a little less risk adverse. But I know the other thing many of them struggle with is, even when they're clear on their for the sake of what, is the fear of what other people will say. So how do we deal with that kind of other people's expectations and criticisms of us so we can be brave in our actions?
Yeah, look, we're social beings. We like to be liked, and we don't like people to criticize us or to disapprove of us, or certainly to be rejected. I mean, it's just how we're made, and some of us are more sensitive to that than others. And, I wrote a chapter in Brave that's titled, I'm trying to think, what's the title? I think it's, give less power to other people's opinions, and more to your own. And at the core of that is when we let what other people think, or what we think they might think, because we don't always know. When we let what other people think dictate our choices, our decisions, what we say, what we do, what we wear, we're essentially giving our power away, and we're letting what other people think run our lives. And it's easy to go through our days and our years and our lives ultimately not living powerfully from, well, what is it that I want? What do I want to do? What are the relationships I want to be in? Where do I want to live? What is it that really lights me up? And not letting what other people think. And then that sometimes means, people may be very critical of you, and they may not like what you say. And we've got to just accept that may be the trade-off for us to be just true to ourselves and truly authentic. And I think the more we can be just really mindful of, well, where am I giving other people too much power here? Where is that running the show? Because that can just stifle us from achieving what we want and changing what we don't.
And I think as you get clear on that for the sake of one vision, other people's criticisms or feedback tends to start dropping away a little bit, of going, well, you know what, I'd rather be out here living my for the sake of what, even if not everybody agrees with it, than not showing up to do what I think matters, which helps as well. But the other piece, I think, even when we get at peace with other people's criticisms of maybe what we're doing bravely, is that inner critic in our own head as well, which is often whispering away in our ears of, you're not really good enough to pull this off, or if you do this, something bad might happen, and how will you cope? So how do we tame that inner critic, and can we realistically?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I've got one, and she can be very noisy and very hard on me. And, and I know that a lot of other people relate. I think my experience is women tend to have a little voice that's sort of much more disparaging than, who are you to do that? You're not good enough. You're not that smart, clever, whatever it is. And I do think the first thing we have to do is simply to acknowledge it and recognize that voice in your head is not you, and it doesn't speak the truth. It actually is really driven by fear. Our fear drives us to stay safe. It wants to protect us, whether it's from physical danger and pain, or from emotional pain of making a fool of ourselves, of being rejected, of trying something and failing. So those little voices we hear, that voice of self-doubt, that inner critic, it's really driven by that innate fear to be safe, of to be harmed, and that desire to be safe. So I think recognizing that's where it comes from. And I've learned to say, okay, I hear it, but thank you, shut up, I'm doing this anyway, because while I might be afraid I'm going to fail and things won't work out, and sometimes they don't, but at least I know I've tried. That fear, letting that fear run our lives, can have people living in this perpetual state of resentment, of frustration, of wondering what if, of regret. And I think that's where flipping it and going, well, where do you need to think about, well, what is that cost of not doing that, of letting that little voice run the show? Because if you let that voice run the show, I'll guarantee you 1 year from now and 5 years from now, you won't be where you want to be. You won't be living the life you aspire to live.
I think that's so true. What do you do with failure, though? So I think it's one thing to calm that inner critic so you can actually take the action. But let's say not everything comes off the way we want it to do. How do we make sure that we're still brave enough to get up off the floor and try again? How do we frame our failures in a way that they don't undermine our bravery?
Yeah, well, look, Michelle, obviously I know you're very familiar with the work of Marty Seligman, and he says, it's how we explain our failures that ultimately determines our future success. So what is it that we're telling ourselves about the failure? And so how we view failure has such a major impact on our success in life, because if we view failure as something that's just a part of the course of achieving success, you try things, sometimes they don't work out, learn the lesson, move on, then we're going to be staying in action, we're going to be far more resilient, and we're going to continually be moving forward more intelligently. When we tell ourselves, when we personalize it, it's because I'm stupid, it's because I'll never be good enough, it's because no one will ever, buy my widgets from me, or I'm never going to have what it takes, no one likes me, whatever it is that we tell ourselves, that those negative things that can't be changed, obviously it's going to keep us from taking future actions and even from learning the lessons. Maybe we didn't do enough research, maybe we didn't engage the right people, maybe we should have trusted people we didn't trust, vice versa. So I think it's really important to be careful. How are you explaining your failures? Where are you putting a spin on them and making them mean something they don't? Don't make it mean anything. Just go, all right, I tried something, didn't get the result I wanted. What's the learning? Take that learning, move on. And honestly, people who can do that, you look at every entrepreneur who's really successful, they'll tell you they failed lots of times. We know the Thomas Edison and the light bulb story, 1,200 failures to get to the success. Imagine if he'd stopped at, trial number, 1,198 because he just felt like he was a loser. So I think don't make your failure mean something. Just learn the lessons and move on. I think that's, to me, I know there's so many things all the time. I'm putting myself out there, and sometimes things don't work. And, it's really easy to get deflated and go, I remember my very first book, sending it off to lots of publishers and just getting one rejection letter after another, and thinking, I think it's a really good book. I don't know why why am I getting so many rejections? And eventually I got a letter and I got picked up, and it's now in, I think, 6 languages, Find Your Courage. But I share that because it would have been very easy to have just thought I'm a failure. I wasn't a failure. I just hadn't managed to get the attention of anyone at that point who could see the merit of my book. And so all of us in our lives, I think if you're not failing often enough, if you're not being rejected often enough, then, you need to be doing more, and maybe you're just not being as brave as you could be.
So I think it's one thing to feel comfortable with failure, our inner critic, people's expectations in our own lives. But taking that to work can be another whole daunting challenge, not least because what will our bosses think? Will we lose our jobs? Do we have permission to be taking some of those risks? So in your new book, you have a wonderful chapter about be the leader you wish you had. Can you talk to us about how do we show up at work and really exercise our bravery when we maybe don't feel like we've got our boss entirely on board?
Yeah, look, and I appreciate there's obviously lots of different factors involved, and there can be, if we're in an environment where we don't feel safe to take risks and to speak up, then it's going to discourage us from doing so. But yeah, I think it's so important always to act like the leader you wish you had, and maybe you have a fantastic leader, fantastic, and good luck to you. But if you don't, where do you need to take more ownership for how you're engaging with the people around you and in the tasks at hand, rather than saying, making justifications and excuses about why you're not really stepping up. And my experience is people who are consistently stepping up, acting with leadership, regardless of their position, regardless of the authority they have, it's recognised. They build their influence formally and informally, and over time that well and truly is recognised and rewarded. So I think, asking yourself in that workplace, what is it that I could be doing that I'm not? What conversations could I be engaging in that I'm not? Where am I not trying new things and challenging how things have been done before for fear of what people might say, or it might fail, not getting support? Where are there stakeholders that I need to engage and people that I need to maybe introduce myself to and connect with, get on their radar, that I haven't for fear of seeming like I'm too pushy or too much of a self-promoter or something? So I think there's always opportunities for us to practice our courage muscles, put our courage muscles to work at work. And, I think in today's workplace, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of anxiety because of that. And I think we distinguish ourselves in those times when a lot of people just stick to their little bit of turf. They don't stick their neck out. They don't speak up. They just say yes and get on with it and put their head down, hope that they don't get noticed and get put on the redundancy list. People who have got the guts to really continually stay 100% engaged, regardless of whether or not everyone around them is being supportive, really differentiate themselves. And not only do they differentiate themselves, but I think within themselves they continually build their confidence, and it actually over time pays off in lots of different ways.
So Eleanor Roosevelt famously said, do one thing each day that scares you. At the heart of it, given all the research you've now done on bravery, is that good advice? Should we be trying to do one thing a day that scares us when it comes to building our bravery?
Yeah, I think it is good advice. I mean, not every day calls us to do something that's really scary, but every day, I think every day ask yourself, what would I do today if I was being courageous? It might be having a slightly difficult conversation with one of your children. It might be extending an invitation. It might be picking up the phone to talk to someone about a sensitive issue instead of flicking off an email or a text because that's a bit safer, hiding behind technology. So I think the more often, as I said, we act with courage and we get out of our comfort zone and we do something, lay our vulnerability on the line, the more confident, competent and courageous we become. So I think if we can all live by that, 365 days from now, you would find that you are a more courageous and confident and resilient person than you are today.
Margie, thank you so much for those wonderful tips.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to talk to you.
I highly recommend Margie's new book, Brave. You can find all the details at trainthebrave.com and places where you can buy it. And if you grab your copy before the 1st of May, you'll be able to join Margie's 10-day Train the Brave challenge, which I'll certainly be signing up for. Of course, if you're looking for other tested, practical and playful ways to move from functioning to flourishing at work, be sure to stop by michellemcquaid.com, leave your name and email address so you can hear all our news first. Remember, you are good enough, so don't be afraid to let your strengths shine. Until next time, take care.